I can still recall the shudder of an army truck outside our door every 1 to 2 years. It was Agra one day, Wellington the next, and Palampur after that. You see, my dad was in the army, so I've grown up in over 10 cities. That is 10 different homes, 10 front doors, and also 10 goodbyes. I'd watch my dad methodically take items off a horrible inventory list that he'd make every single time, while my mother neatly packed in the memories she wanted to carry with her. You see, as a kid, I found it very exciting. A new city was just a new adventure, but it never really occurred to me how lucky we were. Because unlike the rest of India, we didn't pay rent or scramble for a landlord's approval. We had aid from government quarters, a protective bubble of guaranteed housing. Outside those gates, though, a different reality was unfolding. For millions, home is a perpetual scramble. Between 2019 and 2024 alone, house prices in India's top 10 cities have soared by 88%. Homes have now morphed into a luxury that very few can afford. On average, humans spend around 90,000 hours indoors in their lifetime. Our home is our checkpoint. We begin and end every single day there. But if these walls vanish at the landlord's whim or are never within our financial reach, how are we supposed to even anchor ourselves? See, for the last few generations, one directive was hammered into all of us. Study hard, get a job, buy your own place. House ownership was literally the pinnacle of success. Now, with all these new housing projects constantly being developed, it should be an easy path to achieving this, no? Let me tell you another stat here. In Indian cities, 11 million houses sit empty. That's enough to house an entire nation like Switzerland. Meanwhile, 47.3 million families endure slums or unlit underpasses, sleeping in tents or under tarps. This is the paradox we're dealing with right now. And it's important for us to understand it just to be sure what our role is going to be in this evolving crisis. I used to think any individual who was able to save diligently would be able to afford a house. But man, when I looked at the numbers, I saw a stark reality. According to reports, Mumbai's price to income ratio is around 14.3, meaning you need 14 years of your entire salary, food, bills, everything to buy a standard home. To put this in perspective, for New York, it's 10.3, Berlin 9.1, and in New Delhi, it's around 10.1. Experts say anything above 5 is basically unaffordable. Even the supposedly cheaper metros like Pune or Chennai hover around 5 to 7. Forget buying a home outright. Let's say you decide to take a home loan to buy a house. For that also, you need to look at one metric called the EMI to income ratio. So for a house to be affordable, the ideal EMI to income ratio needs to be under 50%. But if you look at the average EMI to income ratio in India, it's around 61%, with Mumbai being 116% and Delhi at 82%. See, I'll tell you what happened. So during the lockdown, people fled expensive rentals and went back home, leaving all the landlords in a deficit of profits. But the moment offices resumed, a stampede back to city centers motivated these same landlords to hike up rent prices and make up for all the lost time. The result? Rents jumped so high that in Mumbai, an average junior employee might spend their entire salary just on a 1 BHK, leaving zero for savings or daily life. Essentially, they have turned the housing market into a survival game. This is absolute madness. You know what's crazier? Even for folks who can afford to rent a house, the rules of rentals are literally changing day by day. So just last month, a lot of our team members moved to Bangalore and they were telling us how their landlords asked for their website before approving their rental application. So even when we were buying a house, the builder asked for our social profiles. And this made me realize how having a strong online presence has become so crucial, not just for housing, but for building trust in any aspect of life. Whether it's to land a better job, showcase your portfolio, land new client projects, or even to buy a home, your digital identity is the first impression you make on someone. But here's the thing, creating and maintaining a website sounds overwhelming, right? Well, I'd like to introduce you to Odoo. Odoo is a one-stop enterprise resource planning platform for all your business needs, and one of my favorite applications is their website builder. Thanks to Odoo, you can make a website within minutes using just 4 simple steps and start designing it immediately. Their AI can even suggest layouts and generate or refine your text based on your industry and goals. You can drag and drop blocks, add text about your business, and add images or choose from Odoo's integrated stock image library, Unsplash. And you know the best part? You don't have to spend a dime for your website since the first Odoo app is free forever. No ads, with unlimited hosting and support. You even get a custom domain free for a year. So if you don't want to waste your time and take your business offerings to the next level, check out Odoo from the link in description below. Whether you're dealing with picky landlords or building a professional brand, having your own website is becoming as essential as having a phone number. And with Odoo, it's never been easier or more affordable to establish your online presence. Speaking of affordability, let's get back to understanding why housing prices have skyrocketed. See, to understand this constantly developing housing crisis, we need to look at the issue through 3 prominent lenses. They seem unrelated but are interconnected in intricate ways. FSI, or Floor Space Index, could be the single biggest piece of invisible architecture shaping our skylines. In Manhattan, FSI goes up to 25, which means they foster the potential for very tall vertical buildings. In Mumbai, the FSI is 1.3 in prime zones, stunting supply. As population floods in, land prices inflate, but fewer homes are developed. So you see, in the 1970s, policymakers tried controlling density, but it inadvertently skyrocketed land prices. Today, maybe 500 families own 60% of prime land in Mumbai. They can dribble out projects at inflated margins anytime. Some experts argue raising FSI by just 50% might slice housing costs by 30%. But who profits from limiting floors? Politicians, well-connected builders, and the 1% with large land banks. This artificial scarcity begets big bucks. Meanwhile, the rest of us fight for fewer slices of a very expensive pizza. British economist John Maynard Keynes warned about rentier capitalism, which is basically an economic system where wealth is derived from the ownership or control of assets that generate rent. It's basically valuing ownership over productive activities like manufacturing, innovation, or labor. In India's post-COVID scenario, we see it in real time. So around then, demand for houses had surged by 72% in some metros and landlords smelled blood. Tenants were made to deposit 10 months rent upfront, abiding by random landlord rules or facing abrupt evictions if they disputed a rent hike. The hush-hush truth, if you won't pay, there's probably an IT professional who will. We have effectively crowned a new landlord class. Instead of farmland, they own 2 BHKs in prime locals. Instead of collecting grains, they collect monthly EFTs. Some call it feudalism 2.0. You pay or you leave. Finally, we have the elephant in the room. Did you know around 77% of Indian household wealth is in real estate? To put this in perspective, in the US, it's just 44%. The mismatch is epic and implies a very dark truth. Black money often runs the show. Indians often store wealth in property, many times using unaccounted money. It's so normalized that some sellers casually offer a black discount if you pay under the table. And this leads to artificial inflation of prices, as the ones who are capable of paying in black are favored over those who prefer formal financing. Additionally, the tax revenue that is lost would have actually gone on to aid housing projects, but not in this case due to corruption. Further, these house owners who bought the property using black money just lock up the houses and keep it stagnant. A property agent once told me, you see those ghost apartments? They are piggy banks for investors. See, if rent yields are only 2 to 4%, why even bother renting it out? It's too much a hassle. Let the price appreciate. You see, here housing is not about shelter, it's become about reaping capital gains and circulating black money while ordinary folks are checked out of the equation. Back in 2008, the economic housing market crashed and caused a global economic meltdown.
The National Association of Realtors reported the worst month-to-month drop in existing home sales since they started keeping track in the late 90s.
要买的话买不起，因为现在房子很贵的。 你像北京这么高的房价，还挺可怕。
China's housing market has been in a slump since 2019. And if we don't learn from past mistakes, we are also going to be following their footsteps down a similar scary spiral. Luckily, just as there are cautionary tales to look at, there are also great examples of problem solving that we've seen in other countries. So back in the 1960s, most Singaporeans lived in overcrowded slums and squatter settlements. Recognizing their dire situation, they launched the Housing and Development Board. The HDB was tasked with systematically acquiring land at low cost and building or selling flats at subsidized rates. Their operation model has proven to be extremely successful, and today 80% of Singaporeans live in HDB flats, with over 90% of them owning it themselves, which is actually one of the highest homeownership rates in the world. It's not just Singapore, we also have the example of Vienna. After World War I, the socialist government launched a social housing program called Red Vienna. They started building public housing units funded by a progressive tax system. This commitment was strictly carried through even after World War II, and their dedicated efforts paid huge dividends. 25% of the Viennese people rent from the city itself at below market rates. Another 25% of them live in housing provided by limited profit associations. These are organizations that operate under strict regulations, and their involvement in the housing market ensures rent prices remain stable. And best of all, you need to look at Tokyo's innovations when it comes to housing. They have no height restrictions and minimal red tape, which basically means that their FSI is really high, allowing tall buildings, and they have streamlined or cut down the bureaucratic hurdles when it comes to construction projects, making it easier for developers to innovate. And the single family zones in Los Angeles or Sydney, where wealthy rich families occupy large acres of land for peaceful isolation, in Tokyo, these zones don't exist. This allows for higher density housing to be built even in residential areas. So when Tokyo's population soared, inflation was kept in check as they had evolved their infrastructure to account for all the changes. Now you might say that a lot of these solutions don't apply to India because India literally dwarfs these places in scale. But the principle here, that's treating housing as vital infrastructure rather than a pure commodity, applies universally. If you want to learn how to make videos like the one you're watching right now, let me give you a glimpse of what it takes. Are we good to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Are we good to go? As you saw, it takes an army of people to create and deliver a well-produced video to you guys, and people who can do this are in high demand. With the right training, you can turn video making, that's from the concept to the final cut, into a high-income skill with our Video Mastery program in less than 3 months. Most of the folks you see here are from our video editing school. So if you're a student, a job seeker, a content creator, or just somebody who wants to get into the field of video making and video editing, our program is the right place for you to start. It will take you from absolute basics and core video editing skills, storytelling, production, motion design, and Gen AI to a hireable editor or video producer. We've trained over 3,000 editors, many of whom are working with some of the top creators and companies. So if you're somebody who wants to learn the skill of video editing, producing videos, or are just curious about our program, sign up for the free masterclass that we are hosting. Link is in the description below. See, if a small city-state can transform slums into stable homes, so can a subcontinent if it harnesses resources and crushes corruption. Now, I'm no expert, but we must address land ownership itself. You see, if we keep treating land as a commodity for speculation, we will remain trapped. But if communities, co-ops, or the government hold land and lease it to occupants, this speculation fizzles. That is exactly how Vienna partially keeps prices stable. The other thing we could do is enforce vacancy taxes on empty properties, pushing owners to either rent or sell. Because honestly, a vacant high rise is an insult to a family living under a plastic sheet. See, if FSI can't be increased by 50%, efforts must go into detailed and transparent breakdown of the city's infrastructure. We need to do this so we can arrive at the most optimal number that will fight against this crisis. And finally, putting in place organizations with limited profits and aiding buyers who don't partake in black money practices, similar to how Vienna does, might alleviate some of the strain from the market. If all of these potential solutions and other efforts shouted out by the experts in the field are implemented, maybe we can effectively provide the first and foremost basic need, that's shelter. Again, I come back to the difference between a house and a home. We say home is where the heart is, often implying a portable nature to the idea of a home. And yet, as one gets older, we somehow mimic the traits of a tree. We desire to plant our roots deep into a stable ground and grow out leaves and fruits in that very spot for the rest of our life. And this, it's everyone's right.